In the early days of her career, long before she became the United States Attorney General under President Donald Trump, Pam Bondi was a young, ambitious attorney carving her way through the legal world of Florida. She had just wrapped up a big case in Tampa when she heard about a new law firm opening in Tallahassee, a firm led by a bright, up-and-coming legal mind named Chris Morgan. Chris was known among legal circles as a prodigy, sharp, relentless, and highly respected even at the age of 32. Rumors swirled that political heavyweights were already scouting him for roles in the Department of Justice. His firm, Morgan & Associates, was assembling a dream team, and for anyone lucky enough to join, it meant career acceleration like no other. One humid afternoon, dressed in a navy blue suit, Pam walked into the towering marble building that housed Morgan's firm. She wasn't there on an official visit. She was there with a simple purpose: to ask for a job. "Ms. Bondi?" the receptionist asked, looking up from her desk. "Yes. I have an appointment with Mr. Morgan," Pam said, her voice steady but her palms slightly sweaty. Minutes later, she was ushered into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Chris Morgan stood up from behind his desk, his brown hair slightly tousled, and extended his hand with a warm smile. "Pam Bondi," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "I've heard your name. Hillsborough County, right? You've been making waves." Pam smiled, relieved at the friendly tone. "That's me. I read about your firm. I'd love to be part of your team if you'll have me." Chris leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You want to work for me?" he said with a hint of surprise. Pam nodded earnestly. "I'm passionate about justice. About making a real difference. I believe this firm is going to do exactly that." For a moment, there was silence, just the soft hum of the air conditioner filling the room. Chris tapped his pen against the desk thoughtfully. "Pam," he said finally, "I'm honored you'd come here. But I have to be honest. We're fully staffed at the moment. I'd love to bring you on board, but there just isn't a slot open right now." Pam felt a twinge of disappointment but kept her composure. "If anything changes," she said, standing up and offering her hand again, "please remember me." Chris chuckled. "I don't think I'll forget you, Ms. Bondi." They shook hands again, and Pam left the office, her heart a little heavy but her spirit unbroken. She had no idea then that their paths would cross again under wildly different circumstances, and that one day, that same young attorney she once asked for a job would be working under her leadership at the highest levels of American government. Life had a funny way of turning tables. In the early days of her career, long before she became the United States Attorney General under President Donald Trump, Pam Bondi was a young, ambitious attorney carving her way through the legal world of Florida. She had just wrapped up a big case in Tampa when she heard about a new law firm opening in Tallahassee, a firm led by a bright, up-and-coming legal mind named Chris Morgan. Chris was known among legal circles as a prodigy, sharp, relentless, and highly respected even at the age of 32. Rumors swirled that political heavyweights were already scouting him for roles in the Department of Justice. His firm, Morgan & Associates, was assembling a dream team, and for anyone lucky enough to join, it meant career acceleration like no other. One humid afternoon, dressed in a navy blue suit, Pam walked into the towering marble building that housed Morgan's firm. She wasn't there on an official visit. She was there with a simple purpose: to ask for a job. "Ms. Bondi?" the receptionist asked, looking up from her desk. "Yes. I have an appointment with Mr. Morgan," Pam said, her voice steady but her palms slightly sweaty. Minutes later, she was ushered into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Chris Morgan stood up from behind his desk, his brown hair slightly tousled, and extended his hand with a warm smile. "Pam Bondi," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "I've heard your name. Hillsborough County, right? You've been making waves." Pam smiled, relieved at the friendly tone. "That's me. I read about your firm. I'd love to be part of your team if you'll have me." Chris leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You want to work for me?" he said with a hint of surprise. Pam nodded earnestly. "I'm passionate about justice. About making a real difference. I believe this firm is going to do exactly that." For a moment, there was silence, just the soft hum of the air conditioner filling the room. Chris tapped his pen against the desk thoughtfully. "Pam," he said finally, "I'm honored you'd come here. But I have to be honest. We're fully staffed at the moment. I'd love to bring you on board, but there just isn't a slot open right now." Pam felt a twinge of disappointment but kept her composure. "If anything changes," she said, standing up and offering her hand again, "please remember me." Chris chuckled. "I don't think I'll forget you, Ms. Bondi." They shook hands again, and Pam left the office, her heart a little heavy but her spirit unbroken. She had no idea then that their paths would cross again under wildly different circumstances, and that one day, that same young attorney she once asked for a job would be working under her leadership at the highest levels of American government. Life had a funny way of turning tables. Christopher Morgan. Chris Morgan, she said aloud in her office, the memory of that day in Tallahassee rushing back to her. The young hotshot attorney who once couldn't offer her a job. Now she had the power to bring him into her team. But Pam wasn't someone who held grudges. In fact, she admired Chris's journey. He had fought battles in the Department of Justice trenches, earned scars, made sacrifices. Pam smiled. Get him in here, she said to her chief of staff. I want him on my team. When Chris received the call from the Attorney General's office, he almost thought it was a prank. Pam Bondi, that Pam Bondi offering him a role as senior legal counsel to the Attorney General? Life, it seemed, had come full circle. Chris Morgan walked into the Department of Justice building with a sense of trepidation he hadn't felt in years. His hands, once accustomed to shaking the hands of clients and jurors, now felt like they were shaking in anticipation of meeting someone who had once stood on the other side of the courtroom. Pam Bondi's office, as expected, was immaculate, a testament to her sharp, organized mind. Her assistant greeted him with a warm smile before opening the door to the office. Pam was standing by the window when he entered. She turned, her blonde hair catching the light, and her eyes met his with an intensity that felt both familiar and foreign. Chris, she said, walking toward him with a firm handshake. It's good to see you again. Chris couldn't help but be struck by the change in her demeanor. She was no longer just the young attorney with ambition, she was the Attorney General of the United States, a figure whose every decision impacted millions. She was polished, poised, and far more powerful than the woman he had once met in Tallahassee. It's good to see you too, Chris replied, trying to hide the awe in his voice. Pam gestured to the chair in front of her desk, inviting him to sit. When I took this job, I knew I needed people who could think strategically and act decisively. You've done that for years, Chris. I've always admired your work. Chris felt a flicker of disbelief. Admired his work? It was surreal. Thank you, he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. I never thought I'd be sitting here like this. When you walked into my office all those years ago, I didn't think we'd be back in each other's orbit. Pam leaned back in her chair, studying him. Neither did I. But here we are, and I have to say, I'm impressed with your career trajectory. The Department of Justice could use someone with your experience. Chris hesitated for a moment. I've spent most of my career working in the trenches, Pam. But this is a different level. Are you sure you want me to join your team? Pam's expression softened. Yes. I've seen what you're capable of. What I need right now is someone who knows how to navigate the complexities of Washington, someone who won't get intimidated by the politics. We've got a lot of work to do, and I think you're the right person for it. Her words were both a compliment and a challenge. Chris understood exactly what she was asking of him. This wouldn't be a job where he could just sit behind a desk and sign papers. This was a role where every decision he made would be scrutinized, where his loyalty would be tested, and where he would have to fight for every legal victory, every piece of justice. But he was no stranger to a challenge. I'm in, Chris said, his voice steady now. Let's get to work. Pam smiled, a smile that hinted at the old bond between them, a bond forged in the heat of ambition, now tempered by years of experience. Welcome aboard, Chris. As Chris left her office, he couldn't shake the feeling that this reunion wasn't just about a career move. There was something more at play here. Both of them had climbed different ladders, had experienced different battles, and yet here they were, on the same side of the fight. It was a moment that felt like destiny. The first few months working together were nothing short of a whirlwind. Pam Bondi and Chris Morgan found themselves side by side, navigating the treacherous waters of the Trump administration's legal challenges. The stakes were higher than ever, and their long hours spent in heated strategy meetings were only interrupted by urgent calls, breaking news, and endless briefings. Despite the chaos, the two former adversaries turned allies quickly became a seamless team. Pam's sharp instincts and unyielding will were complemented perfectly by Chris's strategic thinking and ability to keep his cool under pressure. There was a rhythm to their partnership, one that made them a force to be reckoned with. But it wasn't just their professional collaboration that stood out. It was the undercurrent of their personal history that began to resurface. As they spent long nights in the war rooms, strategizing for high-stakes cases and policy decisions, Chris often caught Pam staring out the window of their office, lost in thought. He wondered what was going through her mind. One evening, as the sun began to set and cast a golden hue across the office, Chris couldn't help but ask, Pam, do you ever think about that day in Tallahassee? he asked casually, his voice betraying a curiosity that had lingered since their reunion. Pam paused, her fingers absent-mindedly tapping the desk. She turned to face him. You mean when I walked into your office, hoping for a chance? Chris nodded. Yeah. You were so eager back then, so determined. Pam smiled wistfully. I remember feeling like that was my one shot, you know? I didn't have any guarantees, but I had to take that chance. And when you turned me down? She trailed off, her voice tinged with a faint edge of old vulnerability. Chris leaned forward, his tone sincere. Pam, I had no idea what I was doing back then. I was focused on building my own career, and I didn't know how to take someone like you under my wing. I didn't realize how talented you were. But looking at you now, it's obvious that you've more than earned your place. Pam nodded, her expression softening. I had to earn everything I've got, Chris. It's not just about the job or the title. It's about the fight, the struggle to prove yourself. I've been knocked down so many times, but I kept getting back up. Chris could see the fire in her eyes, the same determination he had witnessed years ago. She wasn't just the Attorney General of the United States. She was the embodiment of resilience. It's funny though, Pam continued, her voice growing a bit more reflective. At the time, I thought I needed you to give me that job. But now I realize that it wasn't you I needed. It was myself. It was my own fight that mattered. Chris sat back, admiring the woman before him. In that moment, he understood something profound. Pam had always known her worth. She didn't need validation from anyone, not even him. The only person who could stop Pam Bondi was Pam Bondi herself, and that was a person Chris had come to respect more than he had ever thought possible. You're right, Chris said softly. You never needed me. But I'm glad we've found a way to work together now. Pam gave him a small, appreciative smile. Me too, Chris. Me too. Over the weeks that followed, their bond grew stronger, built on mutual respect and an unspoken understanding of what it took to rise to the top. They began to tackle some of the most difficult legal challenges the administration faced, from high-profile investigations to landmark Supreme Court cases. Every win brought them closer, and with each battle, Chris saw firsthand the relentless drive that had propelled Pam to the highest echelons of power. But as their professional relationship flourished, something else was happening, something neither of them had expected. One late-night meeting, as they reviewed a strategy for an upcoming case, Chris noticed something in Pam's eyes that caught him off guard. Pam, is everything okay? He asked gently, his voice laced with concern. Pam looked at him, surprised by the question. What do you mean? You've been quieter than usual, Chris said. You've got something on your mind. Something I'm not seeing. Pam's gaze softened. It's nothing, really. Just the weight of it all. Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it. The pressure, the scrutiny, the constant fight. It never stops, Chris. And there are days when it feels like I'm carrying the weight of the world on my shoulders. Chris sat quietly, understanding exactly what she meant. I get it, he said, his voice low but steady. But look at what we've accomplished. Look at what you've done. You've built something that will stand the test of time. Pam smiled faintly, but the weariness was still there. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. As the days turned into weeks, Chris and Pam grew closer, their professional camaraderie evolving into a friendship rooted in mutual admiration. But just when everything seemed to be falling into place, an unexpected twist threatened to unravel their progress. The air in the Attorney General's office was thick with tension. It had been a long month filled with intense media scrutiny, legal battles, and the looming possibility of a Supreme Court case that could change the course of the administration's future. Pam Bondi and Chris Morgan had poured everything into the preparation for this case, but something unexpected was coming their way, something that could jeopardize everything they had built. An anonymous whistleblower had surfaced, accusing Pam of unethical conduct during her time as Florida Attorney General. The allegations, though unsubstantiated, were explosive, and the media immediately latched onto the story. Headlines screamed, Pam Bondi under investigation for corruption, and AG Pam Bondi in hot water over past legal practices. For the first time in her career, Pam felt the full weight of public scrutiny, and it wasn't just a challenge she faced alone. Chris, too, found himself embroiled in the mess as his connection to Pam was dragged into the narrative. His name was mentioned in several reports suggesting a possible cover-up. The pressure was unbearable. But if there was anyone who could weather the storm, it was Pam. She had been through worse, fought harder battles, and come out on top. But even she knew this was going to be a defining moment. As Pam sat in her office, reviewing legal documents and preparing her response, Chris knocked gently on her door. Come in, she called, her voice tight with fatigue. Chris stepped inside, his expression serious. We need to talk. Pam looked up at him, seeing the concern in his eyes. What's going on? We need a strategy, Chris said, his tone measured. This whistleblower story, it's picking up steam and it's not going away. We can't just dismiss it. We need to get ahead of it and fast. Pam nodded slowly, her mind working through the details. I know. But if we address it head-on, we risk giving it more credibility. If we ignore it, the media will tear us apart. Chris walked over to her desk and sat down across from her. We need to control the narrative. We need to show that this is just a smear campaign designed to take you down. There's too much at stake. Pam was quiet for a moment, her fingers tapping the edge of the desk. I never thought it would come to this, Chris. I thought I could stay above it all, that my work would speak for itself. But now this. Chris leaned forward, his eyes locking onto hers. Pam, you've been through worse. You fought battles that seemed impossible and won. This is just another fight and we're in it together. Pam's eyes flickered with determination. You're right. I've fought my whole life to get to where I am. I'm not going to let this tear me down. With a fire in her eyes, Pam stood up, gathering her strength. We take control now. We fight back, and we fight dirty if we have to. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about everything we've worked for. Chris stood beside her, his voice resolute. I'm with you, Pam. Let's do this. The next few days were a blur of legal maneuvering, media blitzes, and strategic meetings. They crafted a response that would not only discredit the whistleblower's claims, but also turn the narrative in their favor. Pam held a press conference where she confidently addressed the allegations, asserting her innocence and demanding a full investigation to clear her name. Her message was clear. No one would tear her down. The media, once quick to attack, began to shift their coverage as more facts emerged. Chris worked tirelessly behind the scenes, gathering evidence, coordinating with investigators, and keeping the press at bay. The momentum shifted in their favor, and soon, the whispers about the whistleblower faded into nothingness. But even as Pam's reputation was restored, there was a lingering question, one that neither of them could shake. Why had the whistleblower come forward in the first place? Who was behind the smear campaign? It didn't take long to uncover the truth. As they dug deeper, Chris and Pam discovered that the whistleblower had ties to a rival political faction, one that had been working behind the scenes to discredit Pam and undermine the administration. The smear campaign was nothing more than a calculated attack, designed to destroy her credibility. In the end, Pam Bondi emerged victorious, not just in restoring her reputation but in proving to herself that she could withstand anything. She had been tested like never before, and she had come out stronger. As the dust settled, Pam turned to Chris. I couldn't have done this without you. Chris smiled, his eyes full of respect. You never needed anyone, Pam, but I'm glad I was here to fight alongside you. Pam paused for a moment, considering his words. I think we've come a long way from that day in your office, haven't we? Chris chuckled. Yeah, a long way. They both knew the journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges ahead, more battles to fight, but they had proven something important. Together, they were unstoppable. As Pam Bondi continued her tenure as Attorney General, and Chris Morgan solidified his place as one of her most trusted legal advisors, they both knew one thing for sure. The past had shaped them, but the future was theirs to conquer. And they were ready.